My wife lied about her debt while I paid for her house, so I walked away silently, and what happened next left? Her begging for forgiveness. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and for the past 10 years, I poured every ounce of myself into building a stable life with my wife. Emily, when I think back to those early days, it feels like I was living in one of those movies where everything glitters perfectly on the outside, but the shadows are just out of frame. We had just bought our dream home two-story, white picket fence, the kind of place friends envy in Instagram photos, and I remember feeling an almost dizzying pride every time I walked through the front door. I worked long hours, sometimes pulling double shifts, skipping weekends and late nights away from friends, all for that house, for us, and Emily. She always seemed to notice, always made me feel like every sacrifice was worth it. You didn't have to work so late again, she'd say sometimes, with that gentle smile that could melt away the sharpest edge of a stressful day. I've got everything handled. At the time, I didn't question it. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Her charm wasn't just in the way she smiled, but in the little ways she made me feel seen, appreciated, like my grind mattered. Friends and family constantly complimented us how we were the perfect couple, how lucky I was, how considerate she was. It felt validating, almost intoxicating, to have that kind of external approval. But looking back, there were cracks, small ones, subtle enough that I almost convinced myself they weren't there. Sometimes she'd make jokes about money being stressful or sigh dramatically when talking about bills, but she'd always finish with a laugh. Don't worry. I've got it all under control. I should have asked more questions. I should have paid attention. Instead, I buried myself in work, trusting the image we presented to the world, trusting her. Every project completed, every extra hour logged, felt like it was building a fortress of stability hour. Fortress, I remember the smell of fresh paint when we moved in. The echo of our footsteps on hardwood floors we had painstakingly chosen together, and the sun streaming through the kitchen window where we'd sit and sip coffee, dreaming about vacations and kids and everything we'd build. Everything seemed solid, perfect, except sometimes when she laughed about being in charge of the finances, I'd feel a little twinge in my chest, a quiet, nagging unease I couldn't name, and I didn't know it yet. But that unease was the first whisper of a storm I hadn't seen coming. I started noticing the little things, almost a year into living in our house. Nothing overt, nothing that screamed betrayal, but enough to make my gut tighten when I wasn't looking. Bills that I knew were due would sometimes be late, and Emily would brush it off with a casual, "Oh, I'll handle it tomorrow." Sometimes I'd catch her on the phone, whispering urgently, the kind of hush that made me feel like I was eavesdropping on something I shouldn't, and yet I'd convince myself it was nothing. She had always seemed responsible. She had always seemed to have everything under control. One evening, I came home to the faint smell of coffee and the soft hum of her laptop. I peeked over her shoulder and saw a spreadsheet with numbers I didn't recognize. Loan statements, late fees, unfamiliar account balances. My throat went dry, but before I could ask, she looked up and smiled. "It's fine, just some bills I'm juggling." "Don't worry about it," she said, tucking the laptop closed like she'd erased the evidence. I nodded, swallowing my unease. But that twinge in my chest grew stronger. Friends would compliment her constantly. "Emily's amazing. She manages everything perfectly." And it became almost embarrassing to even hint that something might be off. I wanted to trust her because I loved her, and I wanted to trust the life we'd built. But late at night, when the house was silent except for the tick of the kitchen clock and the distant hum of traffic outside, I'd find myself staring at the ceiling, wondering why my mind wouldn't stop replaying that spreadsheet. Then there were the small, dismissive comments. "You worry too much," she'd say when I asked about a receipt or a payment confirmation. Or, "I've got this. Relax," with that confident, almost teasing smirk. And each time, I relaxed. Each time I told myself that my trust in her was my strength. But deep down, something felt off. A shadow beneath her perfect smile, a hesitation in her voice I couldn't pinpoint. I tried to ignore it, thinking I was being paranoid. That love demanded trust, that 10 years of marriage built an unshakable bond. And yet, the tension was there, quiet, subtle, growing like static electricity on the edge of a storm. I didn't know then that these little moments were the first signs of a betrayal that would shake the foundation of everything I thought I knew about our life. And one evening, that unease would finally hit me like a freight train. It started with small, almost innocent slips like the time I found an unopened letter from the bank tucked behind a pile of magazines, or the credit card statement hidden under a stack of bills on the kitchen counter. I felt my stomach knot, a strange mix of curiosity and dread. When I asked Emily about them, she laughed it off. "Oh, I'll take care of that. Don't worry," she said, her tone casual, almost playful. But I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right. Over the next few weeks, I noticed other things. She was quick to end phone calls when I walked into a room, would close tabs on her laptop when I asked to see what she was working on, and had started guarding her purse more than usual. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that maybe I was being paranoid, that maybe it was just stress or habit. But the little whispers in my mind grew louder every day. The unease that had been simmering beneath the surface now had a taste of fear. One night, I stayed up after she went to bed, scanning through our joint accounts to see if anything seemed off. That's when I noticed it. Payments that didn't align with our mortgage or utilities. Amounts that were vaguely familiar but listed under mysterious names. My hands shook as I scribbled down the numbers. I wanted to confront her, to ask her directly. But a part of me was terrified of what I might find. When I finally asked, she smiled, that same reassuring smile, brushing my concerns aside. "You worry too much, honey. Everything's fine, I promise." And just like that, I nodded, trying to convince myself that my instincts were wrong, that the years of trust we'd built couldn't be shattered by a few inconsistencies. But deep down, I knew I had just scratched the surface of something much bigger. That night, lying awake in the dim light of our bedroom, I felt the weight of every late night, every extra shift, every sacrifice I had made for this life. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now felt suffocating, the walls closing in on me. And I couldn't shake the thought that Emily had been hiding more than just a few late payments. I just didn't know how deep it went. I still remember the day I finally found out the truth. It wasn't a casual discovery, like finding a stray bill on the counter. It was a moment that hit me like a gut punch. I had asked Emily for a copy of the mortgage statements to double-check the numbers, and that's when I saw it. Dozens of unpaid credit cards, personal loans, and late notices stacked in a neat little folder she had hidden away. My chest tightened, my hands went cold, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The life I thought we were building together, the stability I had sacrificed so much for it, was all built on a lie. "Emily, what is all this?" I asked, my voice trembling. She looked up from the kitchen table, pretending to be caught off guard. I thought I could handle it," she said softly, eyes flickering away. "I just needed a little time." But the fear and relief in her eyes didn't match her words. She had been juggling this mountain of debt while letting me pay the mortgage, saving, sacrificing, believing that our future was secure. I remember pacing the living room, the hardwood floor creaking under my restless steps, the sunlight filtering through the blinds and hitting the dusty couch. Every detail of our home, the furniture we picked together. The kitchen where we laughed over coffee suddenly felt like a mockery. The betrayal stung sharper than I expected. I had trusted her completely, and she had kept a secret that threatened everything we had. "You lied to me? All this time?" I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily's hands fidgeted in her lap. "I just didn't want to worry you," she replied, her tone almost pleading. But the damage was done. Every late night I had worked, every weekend I had given up. Every sacrifice I had made, it felt like it had been for nothing. The sense of disbelief quickly gave way to anger, then heartbreak. I sat down on the edge of the sofa, staring at the floor, feeling the weight of 10 years of trust unraveling before me. I realized then that this was far bigger than a simple financial mistake, and for the first time, I understood the full scale of her deception and the storm that was about to hit our lives. I just didn't know yet how far I was willing to let it go. I remember that night. Clearly, the air in the house felt heavy, like every wall was pressing in, and even the hum of the refrigerator sounded accusatory. I had tried to steady myself, tried to approach her calmly, but the mix of betrayal and disbelief made it almost impossible. "Emily, we need to talk. All of this, these debts, you've been hiding them from me while I paid for our house. How could you do that?" My voice cracked halfway through, betraying the anger and hurt I was trying to mask. She looked up at me, her face a practiced mask of innocence, but there was a flicker in her eyes, almost imperceptible. I didn't want to burden you," she said softly, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I thought I could handle it myself." "I didn't think you'd understand." I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the kitchen, the linoleum cold under my bare feet. "I understand. Emily, this isn't just a bill here or there. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars in secret debt. I've been working my ass off for us, and you've been lying to me this entire time." She winced, biting her lip, but her defense didn't crumble. "I was trying to protect you," she insisted, and I froze for a moment, stunned by the audacity. Protect me. I had been living a life built on lies, unknowingly paying for her secrets, and now she had the nerve to claim it was for my own good. I felt a surge of rage, but it was intertwined with heartbreak. The woman I loved, the one I had trusted with everything, had shattered that trust in silence. The kitchen felt colder, the late-night shadows creeping across the counters as if mocking me. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand the magnitude of her betrayal. Protect me from what? From the truth. My voice was shaking, and I could feel the tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Emily looked away, unwilling or unable to meet mine. I realized then that this confrontation wouldn't bring the closure I wanted. Her lies had created a chasm between us, one I wasn't sure could ever be bridged. And yet, even as the anger burned hotter with every passing second, I couldn't stop thinking about the next step. The move that could decide the future of everything I had built, because I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay in a life built on lies. By the next morning, the weight of everything hit me like a freight train. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the floor. The sunlight streaming through the blinds, doing nothing to warm the icy pit in my chest. The house that had once been my sanctuary now felt like a cage. Every memory, the way Emily laughed while we unpacked boxers, the smell of fresh paint in the living room, the late nights I spent working overtime so we could afford our dream home, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I had built everything for us, and she had been hiding a secret, so massive it threatened to crumble at all. I could feel the exhaustion and despair wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. My mind raced with questions I didn't want answers to. How long had she been doing this? Why didn't she come to me? Was any of what she said, the smiles, the reassurances of her real? My chest ached, my throat was tight, and I could barely hold back the tears. For the first time in years, I felt utterly powerless. All the trust, all the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, felt like they were meaningless. Emily came into the bedroom, her voice soft, almost pleading. "I can fix this. I can figure it out. Please don't give up on us." I looked at her and saw the fear, the desperation, but the betrayal cut too deep. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand the devastation she had caused, but instead I sat in silence. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, comforting yet taunting, like a reminder of all I had lost. I realized then that I was at my lowest point. The life I had painstakingly built was now tainted by deceit. I felt alone, exhausted, and heartbroken. The anger and sorrow blended into a sharp edge of clarity. I could not stay, not in this house, not with someone who had systematically hidden the truth from me. I had to make a choice, but the thought of walking away silently, leaving her to face the consequences, was terrifying and strangely liberating at the same time. Staring at the floorboards that had witnessed every sacrifice I'd made, I knew that what I did next would change everything. I spent the next few days in a haze of disbelief and quiet fury. Every corner of the house seemed to mock me, the kitchen, where we celebrated milestones, the living room where we planned vacations, even the bedroom that had once felt like a sanctuary. I realized that confronting her anymore would do nothing. She had shown me she could lie without remorse, manipulate without hesitation, and convince herself that hiding a mountain of debt was protecting me. If I wanted control over my life, I had to act silently. I began quietly separating our finances, moving funds into accounts she didn't know about, gathering every document that showed her hidden debts, and cataloging each instance of deception. I felt a strange mix of dread and exhilaration. It was terrifying to imagine walking away, leaving behind everything we had built together. But it was also liberating to think that, Finally, I could reclaim my life. Each step I took felt calculated, almost surgical. Like I was dismantling a trap she had carefully laid over the years. I watched her go about her days as if nothing was wrong, her confident smile masking the fact that she had no idea I knew the full extent of her deceit. Every phone call she hid, every hurried exit to check a bill. Every casual remark about handling everything felt like nails being hammered into the coffin of the life we had created. And yet, I remained silent. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I waited, patient and resolute, knowing that the moment I left would hit harder than any confrontation ever could. The nights were the hardest. I lay awake, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside, imagining the look on her face when she finally realized I was serious. The anxiety twisted in my stomach, but beneath it, a quiet satisfaction began to grow. I had spent years building a life for both of us, and now I was finally taking steps to protect myself. And as I planned the exact moment of my departure, I couldn't help but feel the tension coiling tighter every day, knowing that once I moved, nothing would ever be the same, neither would she. The morning I left, the house was eerily quiet. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting sharp lines across the hardwood floors that had witnessed so many years of trust, laughter, and now betrayal. I packed my things methodically, taking only what was rightfully mine and leaving everything else behind. Each item I placed in the car felt symbolic of reclaiming of control, a statement that my life and my effort weren't hers to manipulate. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. I didn't want a fight, a plea, or an argument. I just left. When she walked in and saw the car in the driveway, her face went pale. "Wait, where are you going?" she stammered, her voice a mix of panic and disbelief. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The look on her face said it all. She finally realized that her web of lies had consequences, and she had underestimated me. As I closed the car door, I felt a strange calmness wash over me, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I was finally stepping out from under the weight of her deceit. Driving away, I replayed every moment in my head, the late nights, the overtime, the silent sacrifices, and all the times she had smiled at me while hiding secrets that could have destroyed us. The house receded in my rearview mirror, and with it, the illusion of the perfect life. The air in the car smelled faintly of coffee and leather, and the wind from the open window hit my face, refreshing me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. For the first time in a decade, I felt free. But freedom carried a price. I knew that leaving silently would force her to confront the chaos she had created, creditors, bills, and the social facade of a perfect marriage unraveling. I didn't gloat. I didn't take pleasure in it, but there was satisfaction in knowing that she would finally feel the weight of her actions. The silence between us was louder than any argument I could have had, and as I drove toward an uncertain future, a thought settled in the back of my mind. She had no idea that this was just the beginning, and that what happened next would leave her begging for forgiveness. The days after I left were surreal. I stayed in a small apartment I had quietly rented weeks earlier. The walls bare, the air still, a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. Emily's absence in my life was palpable, but so was the silence she now had to face in the house we once shared. I didn't hear from her for 2 days, and when I did, it was frantic texts, missed calls, and voicemails filled with pleading and panic. "Please, we can fix this." "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," she said in one voice, trembling, but I didn't respond. I couldn't, not yet. From a distance, I watched as the reality of her secret debts started to unravel her life. Late notices arrived, phone calls from creditors began, and the pristine image of her perfect management crumbled. Friends who had once praised her now noticed the stress etched into her face, the hurried, anxious tone in her voice. The social facade she had carefully maintained began to crack, and I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, and a lingering sadness. I mourned the marriage we could have had if honesty had been a part of it, but I also felt a quiet satisfaction. She was finally facing the consequences she had spent years hiding from me. I remember one evening sitting by the window in my small apartment, the city lights blurred by the rain streaking down the glass, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I thought about all the late nights I had spent working for our dream, and how naive I had been to assume that love alone could shield me from betrayal. The betrayal wasn't just financial light, it was emotional, psychological, and it cut deeper than any late bill or credit card statement could. And yet, even as I watched from a distance, I knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, clarity, and reclaiming my life. Emily's scrambling and desperation were consequences I didn't need to enforce. She was creating them herself. But then, just as I thought the storm had settled, something unexpected happened. The message arrived on my phone that shifted everything. I was curled up on my small couch, the dim glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the apartment. When my phone buzzed, it was Emily. My heart skipped a beat, not from love, but from the unease of knowing she had finally realized just how serious I was. I hesitated before opening it, expecting another frantic plea for forgiveness. But what I saw made my jaw tighten and my stomach drop. She wasn't just panicking about the bills or the creditors. She was pleading for me to come back. "I know I messed up. I can fix everything if you just give me another chance. I can't do this without you," the message read. Her tone was desperate, almost shaking through the words. And for a moment, I felt the old, familiar act the part of me that loved her, that had trusted her implicitly, that wanted to believe in us, despite everything. But I reminded myself of every hidden spreadsheet, every lie, every moment of silent betrayal. My hands trembled slightly as I typed, then deleted, then stared at the screen again. The realization hit me like ice water. She wasn't remorseful in the way I had hoped. She was terrified. Terrified that her safety net, her life built on lies, had vanished. She wanted me back, not because she had learned anything, but because she was facing the chaos she had created alone. And in that moment, clarity replaced the old ache. I had spent years sacrificing for a dream that wasn't mutual. Now, I had the power to decide the ending. And it was no longer about love, it was about control, respect, and self-preservation. I leaned back, the cushions creaking beneath me, listening to the faint hum of the radiator and the occasional honk of cars outside. For the first time, I understood that the silent walkaway had been the right choice, not just for justice, but for my own emotional survival. Emily's desperation was now a mirror of the pain I had carried in silence for years. And just as I was about to put the phone down, another message arrived. This one changed everything. I agreed to meet Emily once, just once, to finalize the details and set boundaries. The cafe was quiet, almost too quiet, the scent of roasted coffee beans and warm pastries contrasting sharply with the tension in the air. I arrived first, hands wrapped around a mug, listening to the faint clatter of cups and the low hum of conversation. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. Her confident, teasing smile was gone, replaced by a nervous, brittle expression. She sat across from me, fidgeting with her phone like a teenager caught in a lie, her eyes darting every which way. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice soft, almost pleading. I didn't respond. I only waited, letting the silence stretch, letting her feel the weight of what she had done. She looked up, meeting my gaze for just a second, and I saw vitriol fear. Real understanding of the destruction her deception had caused. I slid the folder of her debts and our financial records across the table. "This," I said calmly, "is everything you've hidden from me. Every payment, every loan, every lie. Do you understand the magnitude?" Her shoulders slumped. I messed up. "I didn't think it would get this bad," she admitted, voice shaking. I could see the shame in her eyes, the facade of control crumbling entirely. "I've been trying to fix it, to protect us, but I see now that I failed not just financially, but emotionally." I should have been honest. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with a hard, cold sense of resolution. Years of betrayal, sleepless nights, and unspoken sacrifices had led to this moment. I had the power now, the clarity, to decide what came next. "I'm done living a life built on your lies," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You'll face the consequences of your actions. I'm moving forward, and this is your reality now." There was no dramatic yelling, no theatrics, only the calm, undeniable authority that comes from finally reclaiming control. The confrontation ended quietly, but the impact lingered. Emily left the cafe with her head down, finally forced to face accountability. And for the first time in a decade, I felt lighter, free from the burden she had placed on me. But the story didn't end there. The final chapter was yet to bring the full measure of empowerment I had been waiting for. Weeks later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, the city lights flickering below me, and felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. The weight of betrayal, lies, and debt that had once threatened to crush me was gone. I had reclaimed control over my life, not through confrontation, revenge, or anger, but through quiet, deliberate action. Emily had been left to face the chaos she had created, and for the first time, I allowed myself to breathe without guilt or fear. I thought back to all the sacrifices I had made, the overtime shifts, the skipped weekends, the late nights spent ensuring we had a roof over our heads, believing in a partnership that was one-sided, and now, standing there, I realized that my value wasn't tied to someone else's deceit. I had survived the betrayal, and in doing so, I had found my own strength. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and fresh linen. The hum of the city below, a reminder that life goes on. No matter how dark the storm had been, Emily had tried to reach out again, leaving messages filled with apologies and desperate pleas. But I didn't respond. There was no closure to be handed to. Her reckoning had already arrived through the consequences she had set in motion. I didn't need to see her face, hear her excuses, or engage in another round of manipulation. My peace was earned through my own choices, my own resilience. I allowed myself a small smile, remembering the fear and helplessness that had once consumed me. It had been real, raw, and suffocating, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and in control. The house, the lies, the deception, they no longer had power over me. I was free to rebuild, to dream, and to trust myself again. And as I sipped my coffee, feeling the cool night air on my skin, I knew something important. The quiet walkaway wasn't just about leaving her behind. It was about finally stepping into the life I deserved, empowered, unburdened, and finally, unafraid. The chapter of betrayal had closed. My life was mine again.